there are just a slew, a large number of identical flood stories to the biblical flood, with different, from the different cultures spread around the world. So it was certainly a worldwide event. And you mentioned also the extinctions that Earth has had on a pretty repetitive basis. Fortunately, many millions of years in between each of the occurrences, but we've had a good 5 extinction events that have lowered the flora and fauna on the world, on Earth, to almost extinction levels, and yet Earth has always bounced back as good as, if not better than before, and to me that would certainly suggest, there's no proof, but certainly suggest that there was some outside help involved in our planet recovering from many of those disasters. And that does not mean that going back to the early extinction events of 362 million years ago, or 240 million years ago, those events when we weren't around, but life itself, the flora and fauna was replenished quickly. The Cambrian explosion, to me, is one of the great events on this planet. We were talking earlier about, panspermia, the sudden emergence of life, and from single cell life, from all of those years to the explosion that we saw, 590 million years ago, with the Cambrian explosion, it to me screams of outside terraforming, outside seeding by a higher source, a higher life form.
Cambrian explosion.
Well, no, that was the replenishment, the explosion of new species in high levels of life forms. Gotcha. We at the time, the trilobites, this mineralized shelled
organism,
creature, hardly anything but extremely low life. And almost, overnight there was this explosion of high life forms, and we have never seen as great an expansion of different life as happened at that 590 million year ago Cambrian explosion event. And to me, that shouts of seeding, terraforming, whatever one might call it. Speaking of which, we go back to the Epic of Gilgamesh, and we're told in the Akkadian version that after the Great Flood, or I should say before the Great Flood, the gods gathered up the seed of all flora and fauna on our planet and put it into a capsule. And it was then later used to repopulate Earth. Well, to me, that sounded like collecting DNA.
Yeah.
And the capsule was a spaceship. And the collectors, rather than the gods, were the ancient ones. And try to collect the exact specimen, not try to replace it with some copy, but and I shouldn't say that, since it was a cloning process that I believe happened after the Great Flood to replenish the Earth. But again, after the rather minor, by comparison with some of the other earlier major earthly extinction events that we've had, the Pleistocene extinction was towards the lower end of the scale in its severity, And yet, once life started, it took off quickly. It blossomed. Farming, domestication had occurred at the onset of the replenishment of life after the Great Flood. Mm-hmm. You know, that's kind of instead of going backwards, it started ahead of where it left off. Yeah. It was between the Permian and Triassic period, and it was a 96% species kill-off.
Wow.
And if I'm not mistaken, that was the worst ever earthly extinction event. Mm-hmm. And with 96% of life wiped out, how do you come back from that? That is a great observation. I've muddled with that thought in my own head on occasions. That was, you know, there was certainly no
competition
plan to help the dinosaurs survive.
Yeah.
By the ancient ones, and I'm convinced that they were here when the dinosaurs existed. Now, they were not on Earth and trying to cultivate the dinosaurs to be a civilized. I don't mean
Sure.
that. It was just that they were here doing mining operations, getting the natural resources that they needed from time to time to continue their travels throughout the cosmos, and or help some infant race on a nearby planet that might need the natural resources that they would mine on Earth during the time of the dinosaurs or whatever. Mm-hmm. And that also, I'm getting off track here, but
sure,
that's the idea that ancient rock drawings show very distinct drawings of dinosaurs. If one thinks of that, there isn't a way in heck that humans could know what a dinosaur looked like back in rock drawing and rock painting times. You know, archaeologists did not exist at that time. Paleoanthropologists did not exist at that time.
Sure.
Colleges didn't exist, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. How were they drawing them?
Yeah.
Unless they were told, they were shown pictures, they were instructed by someone who had seen dinosaurs actually living. Wow. Or such a high culture that they personally had dug up the fossilized remains of dinosaurs and reconstructed, as our anthropologists, paleoanthropologists have done, you know, in modern times to recreate what a dinosaur would look like. But to me, the more likely is that scout parties, you know, evaluating Earth for life formation and so forth, knew exactly what dinosaurs looked like.
Wow.
And that was then relayed to, you know, early generations of humans, you know, as they were taught in these Atlantis function learning centers and so forth. Let's get rid of them so we can get a species that we can actually work with.
Work with.
There's no question about that in my mind, and exactly as you said, there's solid evidence and indications of a major ocean in the northern hemisphere with construction all around the shoreline. Mm-hmm. And you know, that didn't come about with amoeba or you know, single cell creatures creating structures all along the shoreline of a major ocean. Mm-hmm. It's pretty much accepted by most scientific studies now that at one time Mars had a pretty reasonable environment, one not that dissimilar to that of Earth. And, you know, it would have certainly supported life. It would have been a great planet to colonize if it was not your home world. Mm-hmm. In other words, if the human-like outer planet beings, that species, their home planet was Meldic, Mars would be a very enticing planet to colonize. Now, you're saying Meldic or the ancient ones? Well, the ancient ones would I don't believe that they would have done any colonies. It would have been where they would have gone where life was. So they would have gone to the home planet.
Gotcha. And
that's where they would have concentrated their focus of effort and attention on the home planet rather than on colonies. I do believe that if indeed Meldic was the home planet of the outer planet human-like species, that it was the Meldecians, if you will, that then colonized Mars early, prior to their apex of their high culture before the 700,000 BC destruction of Meldic. In other words, that it would have been the Meldecians that colonized Mars. The only reason for the ancient ones to have built a colony on Mars, if Mars was not the home world of the outer planet human-like species, would have been as temporary shelter after a disaster, be it outside of our solar system, bringing the few survivors of a destroyed planet here because it was most like their planet as far as environment, or after the destruction of Meldic, the few survivors from there to house them in hurriedly constructed structures on Mars because it was close and its environment was more than likely still better than that of Earth. Earth was in the deep grips of the worm glaciation, and one of the most the longest ice maxima of our last ice age. And Earth was less inviting at the time of the destruction of Meldic than Mars was. And I have read fairly decent scientific evidence that indicated that as recent as around 8,000 years ago, in other words, 6,000 BC, Mars had flowing water. It was colder than Earth, but it was still livable. And it had, a little thicker atmosphere than presently Mars has. But it was indicated that there was a possibility that life could actually exist on Mars 8,000 years ago. Or as recently as 8,000 years ago is how I should have said it. I have. And again, this is, I just contradicted myself by saying that the ancient ones wouldn't have built structures or built colonies on something like Mars. But I do believe that it was the ancient ones who built colonies on the moon. And that's exactly what I always thought it was. The example being the earlier one about the dinosaurs, that instead of having a mothership in the region and occasionally going to monitor or satellite monitoring or whatever that they used to see how life was progressing on Earth, they would build colonies on a nearby moon that would not affect life. They were, one thing for sure, the ancient ones did not want to interfere with the development of life. If life was not developing on a celestial body, they felt they could use it to however that they needed to use it for mining, and most of the structures on the moon appear to be for mining operations. It was not necessarily, certainly not for a civilization or high society or high culture. It was a very sparse, very
Operation.
workman's type dome, and you might have some underground or subterranean chambers for overnight sleep and perhaps eating. But the dome then on the surface, you went out and did your mining, and then we left, and we relocated the dome to another area where we were going to do mining. That sort of process. And again, never interfering with life because the moon was lifeless. The observation of structures, dome-like structures, bridges, things of this nature on the moon have gone back to again the 1800s with very, very respected, prominent astronomers at the time, using their telescopes to observe and document in very, very high detail, I might add, the structures that they observed on the surface of the moon. And one thing that I found fascinating with some of the most respected astronomers of the time in the 19th century, where they would go back, night after night, week after week, observing a particular site, and all of a sudden that site was gone. And they would locate another site then sometime later. So to me that indicated that there was activity on the moon.
Sure.
Moving, relocating those domes or those bridges or whatever was in use, the equipment on the surface of the moon, to another location to do additional mining. That gets to the heart, in my opinion, of what the ancient ones were about. The cosmic order that I talked about, where they went in their travels, their main purpose in scouring the universe was to help, assist, guide, civilize, and teach the infant races that they would encounter throughout the cosmos, the universe as a whole.
Gone, eh?
Well, it was to me. And again, there are references, inferences, passing remarks, and things of this nature in ancient texts, especially Sanskrit texts, that seem to indicate it was a dual-fold purpose. One of the purposes was I alluded to earlier about the very destructive, self-destructive nature of the early universe. Civilization would achieve great heights only to destroy itself. And we see a lot of the references in our earthly text of the ages, the worlds, the suns that are referenced in numerous different texts from around the world of these prior destroyed worlds. And to me, I believe they were references of that early time in the universe where cultures would start up and reach high levels only to self-destruct. And it was the 7 early first being species from around the universe. They were not neighbors. They were spread around the cosmos that on their own, they were fortunate enough to survive their own self-destruction. They were at the 11th hour, and they pulled themselves back from the brink. And for that reason, they decided that it was imperative for their survival that they teach the infant races coming up, so the universe, the cosmos, was not destroyed, taking them along with it. So some of it was self-preservation. I think that was one of the definite purposes, intent behind their activities. The second, their more long-term purpose of introducing the cosmic order was to prepare each world for later cosmic unity as a member within a much larger but common celestial community, if you will. Hence imparting a common across-the-board regulatory background, universal trade practices, familiarity with alien beings, along with all the other similar commonalities that each world would experience or be taught under the tutelage of the ancient ones, no matter where that infant race world was in the universe. All of that would prepare each emerging world for eventual commerce, trade, and diplomatic contact with other societies from numerous other extraterrestrial worlds. I really believe that their regulated growth, their commonality in how they approached everything, the introduction of alien life forms to humanity, so we wouldn't be afraid of it when we dealt with it on our own as we traveled the galaxies, as we became an advanced culture that didn't destroy itself and self-destruct. It would just be a normal occurrence then that the world would be in, the universe would be in harmony. But there is such a great reason why Earth is in the mess that it's in. Go back to what I indicated, within the concept of the Elder Gods theory. Because of the colonization here by the outer planet human-like species, the younger gods of the mythologies of ancient Earth, they kicked out. They forced a temporary exile of the ancient ones. The ancient ones have no longer had or been allowed to have contact with humanity. It has been the deliberate guidance, if you will, under the rule of the outer planet human-like species. In other words, Earth has been nothing but a case study in how not to develop a world. Well, I go back to the artifacts, the anomalous artifacts that are found in 4000 BC, 3000 BC. Well, 2000. Well, not so much after 3000 BC to any great extent, but in that time frame, if you look at the advanced culture that must have existed on Earth because of the artifacts that were left, we should be so much further today than we are. And I think the only reason that we have had the explosion of invention, and mainly in electronics, we really have not had a mechanization explosion of invention, but only in electronics. I think that is from the reverse engineering of recovered, crashed, or downed spacecraft of the helpers of the ancient ones. We have record after record of a white race throughout South America as the earliest advanced culture, and in the book I refer to them as the ancient Peruvians, and those were typically described as tall, white beings. White humans, if you will, typically with either blonde or red hair. And evidently the red hair was maybe a little bit more common than the blonde, but both were indicated. And we have that same description in other areas of the world. We know of an early white race in North America, throughout North America. The Spirit Caveman, Kennewick Man, and several other variants prior to 6800 BC, when supposedly or evidently a major, massive flood, regional flood, not global, but regional flood wiped out that white race in North America. And it was then afterwards, almost 1,000 years later, roughly the 6,000 BC, 5,900 BC, is when we finally see the native Red American emerge, and the native Brown American emerge in South America, along with the red Native American in North America. So, and you think of the Central American mythology or records of the white gods that have taught all of their ancestors. The Maya talk about their white gods that taught them. So there was a Nordic race, if you referring to the Nordic alien, and very candidly, those white gods in the Americas, I'm 99% convinced they were the helpers of the ancient ones, and they were of the same race. They were outer planet, human-like graduates. Through the years, they decided to be good instead of bad like their counterparts. Sure. and they assisted the ancient ones, and their generation after generation of offspring did the same. They stayed in the family, if you will, and generation after generation became the human-like outer planet, white, tall, godlike helpers, the Nordic aliens, if you will, that are described in the annals of the Native American, the teachers of the Native American races, the forefathers, their great ancestors. Wow. And those were the white, human-like outer planet helpers of the ancient ones that stayed on Earth after the temporary exile of the ancient ones, the truly alien appearing beings. I could hit on a couple things. The degenerated nature of civilization is exactly what I was referring to earlier, where we were on a path, as recent as 4,000 to 3,000 BC, where we were progressing as we should have at the moral maturity level of what we had obtained as a species, as a prominent species under the guidance of the strict guidance of the ancient ones and their human-like helpers. And because of the disruption caused by the dissident group of outer planet human-like beings that then came here in 5300 BC and began their colonization, and by 3150 caused a world war and completely disrupted the progress humanity was making on Earth under the tutelage of the ancient ones. And for the ancient ones to save Earth and the human population, they agreed to this temporary exile. So the outer planet human-like dissident group of colonists would not set off nuclear weapons around the planet and basically destroy, the planet. If we can't have it, no one can have it type mentality and attitude. And with the departure of the ancient ones in around 3150 BC, everything changed for Earth as far as civilization. So it is my opinion, we were progressing as we should have prior to 3150 BC. It's only been after that time and it made civilization even worse, because at one time we were shown how to do it right, until the departure of the ancient ones. And then all of a sudden, we have this completely different influence, the influence of the outer planet human-like gods that then took over after the departure of the ancient ones. And they did everything to keep humanity down and keep the outer planet human-like gods at the top. And when they disappeared from public view, I didn't say they disappeared from Earth. I said from public view. About 450 AD, they have been working from behind the scenes, from their position of power, as power brokers, as kings, as movers and shakers in the business, you name it. And all they've done is brought plague, famine, war, pestilence upon Earth.
Yeah.
And like you said, we have gone backwards in civilization with the loss of the ancient ones.
Yeah.
And the ancient ones will return.
Mm.
I have no idea when. There was some speculation that perhaps it was the Mayan end time prophecy, the December 21st, 2012 time frame.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, that did not happen. In fact, nothing happened, which I wrote an article prior to the
Mm-hmm.
end times prediction that indicated I don't think a darn thing is going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
In essence, and but we're in a mess, and with the lack of belief in God or the Creator, the lack of the moral decay, the lack of any core value in this in the entire world, around the globe anymore. We're doomed. We're doomed to self-destruct as a civilization, as a species, as a world. Getting into that, really should talk about the I guess the oddities, and again it's the ceremonial or the religious aspect of Easter Island to kind of set the stage. All of the religious connotation, the ceremonial center, if you will, of Easter Island seemed to center around the village of Orongo, and there were about 100 stone houses along the 1,000-foot high cliffs, facing the ocean, all built in a row on natural rock terrace, and all of that construction was very similar to the Peruvian stone construction found at Cusco, Machu Picchu, even Tiwanaku. There is again a universal tie, but with the ceremonial village, there were rock drawings of birdmen, lizardmen, and fishmen, depictions, half man, half animal, and that was also tied in with their written language, which I really believe no one has yet been able to translate. These were carved on wooden boards. Exactly. Called the talking boards. A lot of times referred to as the talking boards. I'm trying to think of the name, but it has been described, compared to, and is it Maya? Oh gosh, I can't. Another culture, far away on the other side of the world, but it was from those talking boards. The Orongo boards, that some legends and myths were derived. And I think the myth you're talking about a spaceship ended up being a translated segment that I believe it was Colonel Churchward, James Churchward, had used a native on Easter Island to help translate and so forth, and it talked about a black and white pointed spider that supposedly would have gone into the heavens if it wasn't held back by the bitter cold. Now, you don't think of a South Pacific island as being cold, but that's, the translation supposedly. And, over and above, it is interesting to note that the landing gear of any NASA spacecraft or spacecraft as we think of in science fiction novels and so forth, or movies, have landing gear that resemble the legs of a spider often.
Sure.
And they're also all pointed at their tips to or nose cones to minimize atmospheric resistance upon liftoff. And therefore, this description of a black and white pointed spider would have been a very, very simplistic but great description of a spacecraft. And further, the inability of such a ship, if that's what it was, to launch due to the severe cold, again, very unusual for a South Pacific island, might be because the fuel was affected, the viscosity of the fuel would have changed drastically because of the cold, or perhaps the severe cold affected delicate instruments on board, or whatever the reason. Evidently, that was the reason it didn't go into the heavens, as the legend seems to indicate. We have to go back into far remote times before 21,500 BC to have that South Pacific location affected by the cold maxima of the latest glaciation, the latest ice age glaciation. So we're talking, if indeed that was the correct translation and that was the correct description, and our interpretation is of a spaceship, it was a long time ago, sometime before 21,500 BC. So.
Wow.
Interesting myth or legend, and that stuck out to me. That I thought that was a great story. The derivation of the elder gods theory relied on two cultures in particular: the Egyptian culture and their hieroglyphic. I can't even talk today. Hieroglyphics,
yeah,
and the massive Sanskrit writings that you just alluded to of ancient India. And ancient India, it was the key. I was reading another a verse in the Rig Veda one night about 1:30 night and morning, however you want to do it, late at night. And it happened to involve the elder gods, and that passage, it finally became the key. It finally clicked on how all of the individual bits and pieces finally fell together into a true mosaic for me. So I am extremely partial to the Sanskrit writings, and of all of the ancient texts, they, to to me, are probably the most revealing of a past that I don't believe depicted Earth per se. Some of the ancient records do. Other records, I believe, are off-world references without saying it. And it is one of the greatest wealths of information, to me anyway, available about the ancient ones, and their texts they talk about nuclear weapons.
Mm-hmm.
They talk about spaceships in the form of Vimana.
Vimanas, yeah.
You name it. They talk about an advanced world, an advanced culture, advanced civilization, at least to 21st century Earth, and actually, in certain degrees, far beyond,
yeah.
21st century achievements. It again, I do believe it is not only a description of what some of their ancestors saw, since they were shown by the ancient ones, the ships, and some of the devices, some of the artifacts that are described, things of that nature. It all ties in with a good relationship with the ancient ones at the time that those stories were created, written down, passed down from generation to generation, or however they were transferred to us in current day. And the Sanskrit records also refer to an even earlier language called Sansar, which was always described as the language of the gods. And evidently that was the forerunner, the predecessor of the Sanskrit language, or at least perhaps where the Sanskrit language was, from which it was derived. And supposedly many of the oldest texts around were written in that Sansar language prior to translation into or copied into Sanskrit, and some of those records supposedly are still held in Tibet by Tibetan monks in their lamaseries, monasteries, hidden in the deep recesses of caves in the Himalayas and so forth. I don't know if that's merely an old wives' tale or if that's completely true. It makes a lot of sense, since the Aryan intrusion around 3000 BC. I know that a lot of records left India going into Tibet, into the mountains, and so it makes a lot of sense preserving those very ancient records upon which much of the Ramayana and Mahabharata and the other much of the other Sanskrit literatures are based on, would have been saved or transported to safety, out of India into the lamaseries of Tibet. Well, it has taken so long to write it. Had I told anyone 3 years ago when I started,
you'd have been committed.
It would have been. Well, it can't be very good if it's taken 4 years now to get it out, or 3 years to get it out. But
I understand.
it is completed in rough draft. I am now just going over it to polish and finalize all of the footnotes and so forth, and then a final reread thereafter. So I'm still about 4 to 6 months away from finalization, but it actually kind of goes more into the after the 450 AD that I talked about earlier, when the younger gods, the outer planet human-like gods, disappeared from public view, and that is a promise. And again, thank you so much for again having me on, and you are the best. I always enjoy our conversation, and look forward to further discussions as we go into the future. And as always, best always. I can be talking to you soon.